Hello, everybody. I would like to introduce you our panelists. From my far right, Renata Hunova. She's the founder and CEO of Global Innovation Access. Dmitry Kustov, founder of partner of Kustov and Associates. Alex Hayes, director international tax practice at Deloitte Tax. And Julian Zegelman, founder and managing director of VZ Ventures. Julian is a corporate business attorney as well. So maybe you can take just a short time, introduce yourself like more in details, and say what you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I have introduced myself yesterday, but just a couple of words. I am representing the Global Innovation Access company. It's a consulting company, and we help to find startups all necessary resources in different countries. And now, with no exaggeration, the best and outstanding conditions you can find in Russia. It concerns mostly tax facilities and grants. So if you want to know more about this, I would like to answer your questions.
Yes. Hello, my name is Dmitry Kustov, right there. I am a founder and the owner of the Kustov and Associates. It's a full-service accounting company. We do everything from reviews, compilations, test services, due diligence reviews, to preparation, tax returns, tax planning, compliance, and various questions of that matter. And I've been working with many people who, by one way or another, connected with this organization. So I'm very thrilled to be on the panel here. So we'll talk more.
Hi, Alex Hayes. I'm a director in the Deloitte Tax practice based in San Jose. My practice is exclusively focused on global structuring for high technology companies. We work with both Silicon Valley-based companies that are expanding into the, out into the globe, and we also work with foreign companies that are looking to develop an operation, in the Silicon Valley area.
Hi, my name is Julian Zegelman. I'm a corporate attorney by profession. I am currently a partner at Velton Zegelman, a boutique corporate securities and litigation firm here in Silicon Valley. In addition, my partner and I formed the seed fund, VZ Ventures, and so we're actively investing in early-stage startups in nanotechnology, biotechnology, and medical devices. And so in the course of my career, I both represented a lot of startup companies that had cross-border transactions in Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. And then also on the investment side, I was part of investment groups that actually ended up either investing or doing due diligence on companies with extensive Russian and international operations.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you. As already started covering in some panels today and yesterday, so the companies, the business, the startups are becoming more and more global. So there's already several startups here who came to US, or looking forward to come to US. So they probably need to know what issues they need to think about, what things they need to consider. And the reason we put this panel together, because taxation, IP placement, jurisdiction, sometimes it's overlooked, or at least maybe overlooked in the beginning of forming the business ventures, because entrepreneurs, they focus in on building the great technologies, building products, right? But they don't maybe think in the beginning, right, how they need to structure the business in order to avoid paying, additional taxes, right? We don't want to pay taxes more than it's, needed, right? Or we try to avoid legally paying less taxes, right? In order to save profits, share profits and reinvest profits in our businesses, right? Future businesses and future products. So let's start with, with panel. And again, I want to make this again as the previous panels practice, so interactive discussion. So we'll start, me asking a couple of questions, and then you jump in and ask, whole panel or just individuals, your questions. So let's start, very simple. Russian startup, started in Russia. They wanted to expand to US. How they would structure legally and what things they need to consider. Maybe we'll start with you, Julian.
Sure. Happy to say that. Well, I think in general, there's definitely some conventions and standards in the U.S. I think that really depend on whether the startup is looking to raise venture funding or any type of investment or not. I mean, if the folks are thinking of bootstrapping or getting to break even on their own, or they have funds to invest, I think they have a lot more flexibility in structuring because, frankly, as long as it's legal and it suits their needs, that's fine. I think the case for most startups is different. The case is that they come over here, they'd like to get established, and then probably raise angel or venture funding down the road, in which case they have some constraints. So they have to play by the rules. They can't do something that's so different and unorthodox and unusual that a US VC investor would look at it and say, wow, this is crazy. So having said that, most startups in Russia or elsewhere that are doing business in the US are organized as Delaware C corporations. That happens to be the standard for venture investments. Actually, funny fact that a lot of funds in Russia that I know and work with, even when they invest in a team that's entirely in Russia and all the operations are in Russia, they still feel more secure and comfortable spinning the IP outside, forming a Delaware C Corp, and investing in that U.S. entity so that it's governed by U.S. law. There is more predictability as far to shareholder rights and other things are concerned. So I think a first thing to consider would be to choose an entity in the state would typically be a Delaware. So that's from my experience.
Okay. Alex, can you add more?
Yeah, so following on from that, from a tax perspective, as I'm sure you're all aware, U.S. companies spend a considerable amount of time and energy and money trying to get as much out of the U.S. as possible. And that can be a very difficult exercise. The U.S. has one of the most broad-reaching tax regimes in the world. Really the only good tax planning for a U.S.-only company is to lose money. Once you start making money, you get taxed, and you get taxed on everything. You get taxed whether you earn it directly or you have a subsidiary that earns it and then repatriates that money in the form of a dividend back to its U.S. parent. The U.S. also has a set of rules they put in place in the earlier, maybe 2004 timeframe that says once you have a U.S. parent company, it is very, very difficult, sometimes impossible, to then move that U.S. parent company under a new foreign parent. And moving it under that new foreign parent is what you'd like to do to enable some tax-efficient structuring, but they put these rules in place to make that very difficult. So my first advice to anyone who is looking to form a company and put some substance and some operations in the U.S. is, first off, form a foreign company. There's a list of usual suspects: Netherlands, Luxembourg, Ireland, Cyprus. You form this company, capitalize it to the extent you need to, and then form a U.S. subsidiary under that company, and then that U.S. subsidiary will then house your U.S. operations. This enables kind of a whole world of tax planning strategies that are not otherwise available. So what we've run into, and I'm sure this bounces off of what Julian has said, is the thing we run into is that VCs, especially I'd say going back a few years, were very resistant to this idea. It seemed complicated. The practical advice was, well, you don't know whether this is going to be a successful company or not, so why do you want to incur additional expense? I think what we've seen lately is that actually VCs are getting more familiar with this idea of a foreign parent company. It's becoming easier to, for example, list in a foreign jurisdiction. We've had a number of companies that have listed in Taiwan, for example, and then a foreign parent structure actually fits quite well to the future listing strategies. So we've seen a lot more acceptance of this foreign parent structure from a VC perspective.
Dmitry, anything?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I actually would like to build on the 2 points that my colleagues made. Definitely, the place where you want to be when you're successful and everything is great. Yes, you want to have a parent, foreign parent corporation, preferably not individuals that own U.S. corporation. And you have U.S. corporation that make sales in U.S. and worldwide sales done out of parent. But just the panel before, we were talking about, well, how about $20,000 for the new startup? How about 30? How about 100? And of course, structures like that can easily run you 10 grand a year just to sort of maintain it. So I guess my first advice as a general matter for any sort of planning on the international arena, try to keep your options open as much as you can. So whatever you do, consider that if situation changes, if let's say from a hope of startup you just become a bootstrapper, something, I'm not sure exactly what it means, but I guess it's like times are hard and you just make your money. Or maybe instead of selling a company, you just want to service it for 10 years, come here to Bay Area, maybe pick up some projects, go back to Russia and service it, and you don't want to get taxed in US at all. Okay, perhaps this is one of the outcomes that you might get to. So in that regard, there is probably a case to be made for some sort of a, what we call pass-through entity or pass-through structure in the very early stages when you just try to get into US to test waters, so to speak. You know, they're called LLC, limited liability companies. So that sort of provides you a very flexible opportunity later on to say, you know what, forget about this LLC, so I know what I want after 2 years. I'm just going to go with a full-blown Delaware corporation. And you can easily do that. There's no tax consequences, so moving from one to another. Okay, so, and of course, on the other hand, if you were successful in Moscow and some places like that, and say, well, I know exactly what I'm doing, do Delaware, you know, I would say my advice right away, there's no problem with that. So if you sort of start slow and keep your options open, definitely watch out for, you know, whether or not you're personally subject to US taxation, to what extent. I think I have a handout there about the residency questions. Very important, we can talk about it later. But, you know, there is a case to be made for slower steps forward and sort of, you know, and then later on you can move this LLC or future corporation under a different foreign entity, so it shouldn't be a problem. So.
Okay.
Alexei, in your example, it looks very strange that a Russian startup doesn't have a Russian entity. But as far as it should have, in Russia, you can pay no taxes on your profit and income for 10 years. No taxes at all, but with the condition that you are a resident of Skolkovo Foundation. But that's true. So in any case, it's very comfortable to make a Russian entity and to become, if you can, of course, to become a resident of Skolkovo and have an opportunity not to pay taxes on profit and income for 10 years. So if you have such a condition, you can open just your subsidiaries anywhere in the world.
Great, yeah. Now on the Skolkovo, so I remember when it just started 3-4 years ago, right? There was requirements very tough, or like when we actually first learned about the requirements to become a resident Skolkovo, none of us like said it's just impossible because like, you know, they were very, you know, strict in terms of, you know, IP placement and some other stuff. So can you maybe speak more in terms of, you know, how easy to become a resident of Skolkovo? What other advantages? Because there's a lot, you know, more, you know, many startups here are Russians, right? They still want to come to US, but they want to take advantage, you know, tax advantage and other advantages that Skolkovo or other Russian regions offer now.
Yes, I can even say that now we are working with several startups from Silicon Valley, and the founders are American residents or even Korean residents, so just wherever. And we help them to become residents of Skolkovo. So this is the most important thing in our job now. And let's start with the opportunities and advantages. Well, as far as you are a resident of Skolkovo, you can pay no taxes in 10 years. You can pay less taxes on your employees' salaries. And you can also use special conditions on your custom affairs. I mean, you have custom privileges. And it is not necessary to transfer your IP from foreign company. If you have one, if you have an IP already, you can just leave it on in US, for example. But also, Skolkovo is going to give you rather huge grants, up to $5 million for research and developments. So it's very comfortable to open an R&D department in Russia, to apply for a grant from Skolkovo, and also there are several programs in Russia from the government, from the Ministry of Economy also to support innovative companies. And your new IP can be probably registered in Russia on your Russian entity, but that's okay if after a year you will transfer it to your American company or any other company. What else? In Russia there are now several good platforms in the process of establishing in different regions. For example, in Tatarstan, I have mentioned already yesterday that a new technopark now is designed. Its name is Innopolis, and it was presented just yesterday. And well, that was a great news in Russia, just because Innopolis has a bigger land for it. Just for example, Skolkovo is going to build its technopark on 400 hectares, and in Kazan they are going to build Innopolis on 1,200 hectares. So there's a competition in Russia, even just between governmental projects. So there are plenty of opportunities now, and you should consider that, because grants are given not for your share. It's just free money. We call it just free money. You are obligated only to show a good business plan while you are applying for a grant, and afterwards to prove that all the milestones mentioned they are achieved. So this is all what you need. But it's not very difficult to become a resident of Skolkovo if you have a good innovative idea. But if you don't have, so that it means that you can't become a resident. So it's rather possible for every startup who can prove that his idea is really innovative.
And by the way, I want to mention that Renata came up with the name of Innopolis and suggested that to the government of Tatarstan. It was approved yesterday. So
yes, that's true. It was just rather funny, because we have approved this name with the president of Tatarstan Republic in Twitter.
Wow, okay, great. Let's see from the audience, any startups, any startups that already part of or residents of Skolkovo or considering or applying for grants? Can you raise their hands? 1, 2. Wow, okay. Okay, great. Maybe you can also, speak your experience, during our panel discussion. And there's a question.
So is that anyhow, as you, Renata, you experience, anyhow, you may recommend to startups which develops their projects and would like also join Skolkovo team, how to promote them, not only online way?
Well, you should stop thinking that any personal connections will help you to apply and to become a resident of Skolkovo. This is the most important thing. Well, it's really so. You can apply online and fill the application form in both languages, in Russian and in English. You can even apply only in English, and then Skolkovo Foundation will translate your application themselves. But you won't see the results, so there can be some misunderstandings in the description. So we recommend to use your own translator, or just we can translate if you work with us. And they are specialists in each cluster of Skolkovo. They are very open and they are ready to help you, but in any way it can't guarantee you just that you will become a resident of Skolkovo. So it's just don't think about this at all. And for sure, it's very important to know how your project should be described for their side. So in what way the experts of Skolkovo want to see your project. And this is what we do. We just help to find correct words and to put them in right places and to help startups with the positioning, and probably that's all. But this is very important.
So our situation, when we understood the business idea, we understand where we should move, we also understood that the future of our service anyway in US. That's why I'm here, by the way. And therefore, we went to the, let's say, a lawyer company and established the LLC here in California, in Sacramento. And that was a question on that moment: should we make a offshore, like a Delaware or BVI, or should we go just to California and make company here? In that moment, we decided probably it will be just more, how to say, easy to find even investments in a deal when the company is just stated over here or over the road. And now I understood that probably it should be structured through the BVA or something. And the question, did I understand you correctly that we later can either move the location from the Sacramento to, for example, Delaware, or make a Delaware company and subordinate Sacramento company to that new offshore?
Well, as far as, yeah, basically from the tax point of view, there are actually a few issues that you touched on. First of all, if you have presence in California, whether or not you call yourself Delaware or anywhere else, you're supposed to register in California, you have to pay a California tax. And if it's taxed as partnership or single member LLC in California, there are some fees applied and so on and so forth. From the, as far as the foreign jurisdictions, as I understand, if you are non-residents that own this LLC, let's say maybe you and a couple other partners, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you can just contribute your shares of, I mean, your membership in LLC into a foreign corporation. And that foreign corporation will own the parts of that LLC, but go ahead.
Yeah. The issue you have is that from a U.S. federal income tax perspective, that LLC is likely treated as a partnership if you have more than one owner. If you have a partnership that's engaged in an active trade or business within the United States, and you take that partnership and you contribute its assets into a new foreign corporation, then under these rules that I alluded to earlier, that foreign corporation will actually be taxed as a U.S. corporation. And it's taxed as a U.S. corporation in perpetuity. So you do run into this sort of structuring issue.
Except that my point about LLC was to start with it, but when you get to these issues, you basically, we call it check the box. You just say, well, from now on, I just want to be taxed as a corporation, and it's no tax consequences to you. So this way, you sort of separate the two, and this foreign company is not considered to be doing business in California. So I just...
May I just summarize for myself? So we can start with that LLC in Sacramento, and that's all fine. For a year, we'll live with that.
Yeah.
And later on, when we will earn first revenues and all that stuff, we just, let's see, either close that company, establish a new one in Delaware, or subordinate that to Delaware. That's right?
Right. I think it's perfectly fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Delaware is just between the states in the United States. There's not a tax issue with taking an LLC and forming a new Delaware corporation and doing a variety of things to move the operations into that new Delaware company. From a U.S. tax perspective, that's okay. If you take the operations and actually contribute them to a foreign corporation, that's where you have this risk that under the U.S. rules, your foreign corporation will actually be viewed as a U.S. corporation forever, and that has, that then requires you to go through more tax hurdles from a U.S. tax perspective to do tax-efficient structuring.
If I can just jump in with kind of like playing devil's advocate here and kind of push on the side. I mean, I think the colleagues did a great job exploring sort of like the planning. I want to tackle this from a practical standpoint that everything we're talking about right now, tax optimization, it entails one simple assumption that A, you're actually making money and you're making more money than you're spending because as my colleagues are more qualified to comment, the US tax regime does allow for a lot of deductions on business-related expenses, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at the threshold of revenue where the tax optimization actually kicks in and gives you real, tangible, hands-on advantage that outweighs the time and the expense of maintaining those complicated structures, it's not for everybody, and it's hard to predict from day one whether you're going to be there or not. Just sort of like from my experience over the last 10 years, especially when the economy is good, a lot of companies are selling without making a single dollar. A lot of companies are selling with a carried on loss. A lot of companies are selling with very modest revenues because they sell on assets, IP, teams, etc. So I think as an entrepreneur starting out, I think you have to look at your business carefully and realistically and pushing aside the best case scenario that you're going to be making millions in 30 days from yourself. When am I going to be at profitability? What is the profit levels at that point likely to be versus my expenses? How much optimization will I get onshore? That means simply staying as you are in a U.S. jurisdiction, perhaps in a state with low or no local state income taxes, Nevada, Delaware, or Wyoming, any of those, and then ask yourself, do I really have to put in the complicated structure today? And if the answer is yes, and please, by all means, even I as a corporate attorney always tell people, talk to the tax advisors. Talk to the CPAs, talk to the international tax advisors. It's different from corporate law. Because the reason why is, here's a small anecdote. I was representing a client who had actually revenues, fairly high revenues, but who had a very complicated offshore structure that parts of it were implemented by accountants and part of it was sort of just, the CEOs thinking of how things should work. They had offshore entities in Luxembourg, in Hong Kong, in BVI. They had entities in Russia that were actually handling the Russian operations, the development centers, etc. They had a main entity in Delaware that was supposed to be the recipient of venture financing. The business was great. They attracted a venture fund that was looking to do a $5 million Series A, first institutional money into the company, and the deal fell apart after 6 months because in the course of the due diligence, the investors did not understand some of the aspects of the offshore planning. They asked the company to change it, the cost of one of the top 4 accounting firms came back was about $400,000. When you're raising $5 million and right off the top you got to spend $400,000, basically the deal went stale and then it fell apart because the structure was too complicated. Looking at the benefits that the company got from that tax structure versus actually optimizing in other ways, they probably weren't that much greater. The loss was a $5 million investment that the company basically couldn't close on. So planning is very important. I think it's important to keep your options flexible, but don't feel from day one that you have to rush out there and create this complicated structure that maybe suits a multinational company or a company with revenues and operations in foreign jurisdictions. But if you're a straight up startup, it may be a year or 2 or 3 before you even get to that point. So just kind of like playing devil's advocate for the other point of view.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. And typically you want to split apart a legal entity framework where you might have one company, maybe you don't even form a U.S. company, maybe you just form a foreign company to house the operation. That gives you the flexibility. It's still a very simple structure versus actually creating what sounds like, in your case, there was an operating structure that was created thinking that there's this pipeline of revenue that's about to hit, and it was ahead of the game, and it actually created complexity in terms of getting the financing. So certainly want to always right-size your structure, keep it as simple as you can, and also then maintain the flexibility to put something else in place as you grow the company.
Any questions from the audience? Okay. Okay.
I have a question to Renata. Renata, can you please explain, once you become a resident of Skolkovo, what do you have to do? Do you have to physically present, your offices have to be physically present in Skolkovo, or what are other requirements that you need to comply with if you apply for a grant and you win, supposedly, at Skolkovo?
So basically, yes, there is one obligation that you have to put physically your CEO, at least your CEO of your company in Skolkovo, but physically they will build their technopark, their buildings only in 2014, so you have at least 2 years till that. If you want, you can bring all your employees there, for example, for R&D purposes, but it's only after 2 years from now. And as for other requirements, they are all written in the federal law, but well, they are not just very complicated. So it's mostly concerned about your taxes and about your entity and just something like this. But don't pay much attention to that because they are not very strict. And I also would like to mention that it's very important who are the founders of US entity. If we are talking, for example, about a Russian startup, because I think that's at least CEO probably, or some people want to move to US. And so the next question which will appear, it's your visas.
Yeah, so the next, let's talk about the mobile workforce, right? Building global startups, we already see, founders, partners of new companies coming to US or, going to other countries. Then the next step will be moving some of your employees on part-time basis, full-time basis. Let's ask guys, what's your experience and what's your advice in terms of, taxation, in terms of legal structure, in that regard? Dmitry, you want to start?
Yes, sure. From the US perspective, because I'm mostly the practice, of course, in the US, and it's hugely important, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that you keep track of your personal, you meaning entrepreneur, investor, or worker who just here service other businesses, keep track of your residency here in United States, personal residency, because as you may know, most of you probably do, United States taxes you on the, if you're a tax resident, which has nothing to do with being immigration resident. All it means that you're here more than 183 days during the year. And the days counted for the prior year and 2 years ago. Under a certain formula, so it's a third of the prior year and the 1/6 from the 2 years before. So if you add it all up and you have more than 183 days, so you automatically become taxed to the worldwide income. What does this mean? Well, not much if you only make your money in the United States and you don't really have any other assets anywhere else. So if you're just a worker, maybe you don't file your tax return, or you file it late, you get a little penalty, it doesn't matter. But let's say if you have a couple $100,000 back in Russia just sitting in a bank account and they decided to venture out to the Silicon Valley. And you missed it, 183 days, you don't file your required forms, you don't file this F-bar form where you disclose your foreign financial asset, the bank account. What happens is that you can easily be hit with a $100,000 penalty if they prove that you did it on purpose maybe at some point, but at least $10,000 penalty for simply not following the simple law. Just send one form, it takes 5 minutes to do, and a lot of people got burned on that. So I guess the planning for the global workforce starts with the entrepreneurs and actual people who move around, that they have to realize coming to the United States that there may be some filing requirements and compliance requirements to follow, not to get in trouble. I would like to mention, even though let's say you are a US resident, but there are a couple of things that you can do to take yourself out of this position by filing, again, forms and explaining that, yes, I've been here more than 183 days, but most of my business is in Russia or somewhere else, or Ukraine. And they will just say, okay, so there is a treaty between the United States and Russia and Ukraine and many other countries that allow you to do so, and it's called treaty tiebreaker. So you can do this, but how we call it, you have to invoke this treaty exception, so you have to apply for it and make sure government is aware of your days present now and that you don't want to be taxed on your worldwide income in the US. So it's one of the examples how you can easily get in trouble by simply not following the forms. And also, speaking about the treaties, let's say if you have an LLC here in the United States, and all you do is, let's say, provide some personal services. Sometimes you travel here to the US, sometimes you're in Russia. It may be that most of your income will not be taxed in the US because you have certain treaty when you have to be here more than 183 days in order to be subject to tax. It's just one of the examples how you can but if you don't invoke it, if you don't announce it, you don't get this exception. You miss 1 year, you get taxed next year with the penalties and interest and so forth. So this is just one of the examples how you sort of, by timely following procedures, you can save a lot of headaches later on and also help your immigration status, because immigration authorities do not like people who didn't follow who didn't file tax forms, didn't follow proper procedures, didn't pay tax. And there is a big case right now going on with the Supreme Court, where a Japanese family is getting deported just because they didn't file a few years of tax return, having a green card already. So I guess this is my sort of one point that I would like to make in that respect.
Yeah, I don't practice a lot with individuals, but having seen one situation where a UK individual was moving to the US to work for a high technology company that was pursuant to a transaction in which the US high-tech company had bought this individual's company. They went through some complicated UK structuring steps involving, say, an Isle of Man company and some other steps that were all intended to help them from a UK perspective. In doing so, they put themselves at risk of about $2 million of US tax because there were certain steps that occurred after they had come to the US, US companies saying, come right away, the deal's done. So they moved to the US, and then certain steps had still yet to be completed in their offshore planning that had been done, and they put themselves at a critical kind of problem. And so we were actually able to help them in that case. But I think what it calls out, and what Dimitri's point is a very good point, which is when you're moving cross-border, look at what you have, look at what your assets are, what your income is, and then realize that when you obtain U.S. residency, basically everything around the world is going to be subject to tax. And then if you ultimately exit the U.S., you then have to pay attention to the U.S. expatriation rules. So it's just really saying anytime you're moving around, or if you're moving employees into different areas of the world or research centers or whatever, you need to pay attention to what you're subjecting them to from an individual tax perspective. It can be a pretty bad answer when you move someone to a foreign country, or move them out to a different jurisdiction, and then they end up subject to a big tax bite. A lot of times they quit. And that's not what you want.
And taxes in Russia, Brunat, is 13% flat, right? Individual.
Yes, but you can become an individual entrepreneur and pay only 6%.
6%?
Yes.
On what?
If you are registered as an individual entrepreneur, in Russian it's индивидуальный предприниматель, you can pay only 6% per your income.
Okay, and there's no taxation on individual level, right? Only
yes.
tax, so the only
yes,
like.
But
right.
then this income won't be your salary, so you will get some. You won't get any preferences with your social.
Like Social Security.
Yes, like
right,
Social
okay,
Security.
Okay.
This won't be a salary formally, but you just want. You should choose what do you want more.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of comments I want to make on a slightly different side of this. So tax is very important when you're moving global workforce, or when you're moving here as an entrepreneur, vice versa. Another two important things to keep in mind is immigration status. Talk to an immigration attorney, make sure that A, you're getting all the benefits of your U.S. company and your U.S. investment if you'd like to get, change your status here in the future. B, very important is U.S. and California employment laws. So for example, a situation that comes up from time to time in due diligence is, when we're doing due diligence on a company with foreign founders, let's say they already raised a bit of money, they're paying themselves salaries, the question comes up, are they authorized to work in the U.S.? Because believe it or not, circumstances change. There's people with all different types of immigration status. I mean, there's folks, I've known very successful folks who, the way they came to the Valley was on a tourist visa. They rented a hotel room, in San Francisco, pulled out their laptops, started coding, raised money, and kind of took it from there. But the problem is that when we're doing due diligence, if the entrepreneur, the founder, is not authorized to work in the U.S., A, the company cannot pay that person in the U.S. B, it's a bit of legal gray area, but a lot of funds and attorneys taking a conservative approach. They say that person cannot even hold an officer position in his own company. So sometimes you have this paradoxical situation where you know, you have a founder and the main technical person of the company who all of a sudden, upon coming to the US and establishing the US company, realizes that A, he can't be the president, B, he can't pay himself. And it's not a pleasant situation from an investor standpoint either, because then we have to quickly fumble and try and come up with ways to change that person's immigration status, pay him, you know, offshore, and, you know, et cetera. It's a mess. So people, you know, especially entrepreneurs, tend to focus on the technical aspect of things and kind of brush this over. But it is very important. And as the company grows, it's extremely important because A, the authorities are going to look at it at some point, and B, this kind of stuff is going to be looked at and scrutinized at every due diligence level. So every subsequent round of financing, potential acquisitions, other things, you want to make sure your employment structure is in place, everybody's properly authorized to work in the US, everybody's properly classified as an employee or independent contractor, you have your minimum, you know, employment infrastructure in place for compliance.
Okay, so on more, you know, practical level, let's say the companies come in here, they need to make sure they know what the employment status will be. They need to make sure that they put the proper legal structure, right? And maybe right away, you know, to go to the next level, right? You know, apply for the permanent residency or working visa, right?
Exactly.
And it takes some time.
It takes some time. There's great immigration attorneys in the community. I mean, here's one of my colleagues is actually sitting at the table, Yana Tkachenko. I worked with her in a number of companies. So yes, you know, find a good immigration attorney, talk to them, figure out what your plans are, figure out how that fits with your tax planning, and also make sure that you're not breaking the rules from day one. In other words, if you're not authorized to be employed in the US, don't pay yourself a salary, you know, don't represent yourself as an employee, and be prepared that investors might ask you, you know, what is, you know, where's your authorization, how come you're the president and the only, you know, employee on payroll, yet legally you're not supposed to work here, and you are working here in California. So yeah, just keep those things in mind.
Okay, sounds good. I'm sure there are questions.
With being a bigger company with, you know, some round of financing behind you and wanting to expand and grow, you have to sort of budget for consulting services like Deloitte, or, you know, retaining a really nice tax attorney or an accountant. When you sort of grow organically from nothing, as a lot of companies do, you know, when your whole starting capital is $50,000, $10,000 for an attorney is a lot of money. What resources would you recommend where you can go and basically collect as much information as possible before you realize you have to go to the next level of expertise?
Sure. So first of all, I think, you know, we're all very lucky to be in Silicon Valley, because one of the companies I've launched, for example, with two other co-founders, we've launched it on, believe it or not, $50,000 budget, and then we raised over $8 million for it. So, and we faced this exact problem. We didn't have an issue necessarily with legal help, because, you know, I happen to be an attorney by training, but we faced the issue with attracting CFO services, accounting, other, and I found two things. You know, one is you get what you pay for, and two, networking helps, because there's a lot of folks in the Valley who are great professionals, and at the same time they're entrepreneurial enough to either share a little bit of free advice on occasion if they like the project and you have a relationship with them as a person, or B, even take a little bit of equity or deferred payment, or have some kind of deferred arrangements. I don't think it's a big secret that most of the large law firms, and as well as small firms, my firm does that, we have some deferred arrangements. We take equity sometimes in lieu of fees for legal services. I know there's CFO groups and individual consulting CFOs who do similar things. So yeah, it's very important to budget. Again, I think it's important to kind of understand what you need today and what your budget is, because I agree, you know, when you raised $100,000 and you go to the biggest law firm in town and you pay them $50,000 for the legal work associated with that raise, they probably have done a superb job representing you, but you just gave away half of the, you know, funds you raised. So I think just one answer is networking. I'm sure there's folks around you and in the community who are willing to help. It's just a matter of getting to them.
Alex, yeah, what's the Deloitte does?
I think that's a great point, and you certainly had a lot of conversations with startups where, you know, it's on an initial basis, and I'm happy to share information. The biggest tension that we have is that someone comes in, they say, I've got a very small company, I don't really have any problems, I just want to set something up that's simple, and then you ask them what they want to do, and they say, well, I want to set up a research center in Singapore, and I want to set up a data center in Hong Kong, and you say, well, these aren't simple questions. You either have the money to pay for the answers, or you're willing to live with the uncertainty, and the difficulty is that your perception of uncertainty may be different than your VC's. So all of a sudden you go down this path and you say it's just getting more and more expensive, and at some point they say, well, why are you charging me so much for this advice? And it's some pretty complicated stuff. So part of it is asking listening to your advisors too, to say, I want something simple. What is simple in this case? And what uncertainties will I have to live with if we don't do more work?
Dmitry?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, of course. And let's say if it's for anybody, let's say if someone wants to start something in a technology field and they don't know anything about technology, so how do you go about it? So you try to kind of ask people who you know and what they know and what their experience have been. One thing I noticed, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I guess my best clients, they actually read, my best clients just ask me what to do and they just do what they're told. But let's say next best, they actually go ahead and they read all those laws. So, IRS website, irs.gov, has an amazing amount of resources there, and you basically can get along by just reading it if you have enough time, of course. But they're also very confusing, and they give you results that they wanna have, right? So, but at least, and I like repeating it, is that, okay, so who are the accountants? Accountants are the people who will solve the problem you didn't know in a way you don't understand. So basically, before even going out and asking accountant, you sort of maybe a little bit do homework, ask around, prepare yourself to what kind of questions are solved in that respect, and sort of do that, and it will be much more efficient work that way. And definitely, in regards to making the person interested, invested in your business, either through a deferred fee arrangement or equity, or having him or her on advisory board in some capacity participating, I think it would be very interesting for a lot of advisors to do that. And if they engaged and they've invested in the company, they'll give you a good deal. And and of course, and then if you're willing to spend a little bit more time, maybe get them into your network of friends and have them sort of welcome, you're kind of going to get something in return. And then, of course, other companies have money, easier for them just to pay off and go away. But right, if you completely start up, then perhaps something like that would be helpful, I guess, yeah.
What I can add is that a team needs to have a person inside who will work with all of us here.
Yeah,
that's for
right.
sure. Right, and again,
yeah.
Before, I know personally, before making any move or hiring, I mean, definitely just, network a lot. Try to get as much as free advices, and there's, audience here and the panelists, willing to share. We have good experience, and then just, get, what you need. Start planning early, right? And it will take you some time to figure out. You don't know where your company will be in the next 3-4 years, right? But at least, you start brainstorming, getting more information, sleeping on it, and then, it will not happen overnight, right? It will take time. But again, get planning early, starting, planning, early, and thinking about, different type of issues, and just talking. And the audience is, willing to help. Any more questions from the audience? Yeah. Yep. Oh, no? Okay. So a couple of weeks ago, there was interesting article in the Forbes. So World Bank does annual publication on, I think it's even called the same thing, like doing business. And so the U.S. and the rates by different, categories that U.S. There are two main ones, like start up the business, how easy to start up business in different countries, and I think it evaluates 187 countries, and doing business, like continuing doing business. So continuing doing business, U.S. still maintains, I think, in number 4 or number 5 in the last several years, but startup business, it's fell from number 4 to number 13. behind countries such as New Zealand, Australia, Canada. So for instance, the costs went up by twice since 2008, since the last recession. Can you comment on that, your experience, why, that happened? Why it's more expensive? Again, the unemployment is high. U.S. government's supposed to make more initiatives, right, to decrease the employment by making easy for entrepreneurs from around the world to come here and start the businesses. Can you guys comment on that?
I think the main problem we have is that we have multiple jurisdictions that apply. So you want to start a business in Santa Clara County, San Jose. Now you got the city of San Jose requirements. You got Santa Clara County requirements. You have California requirements. You have federal requirements. Okay. And when you compare it with a country like maybe New Zealand, where you might only have federal requirements, so you have a one-stop shop for getting your business approved. I think that's probably what it's predominantly down to. And those regulations, in terms of environmental regulations and other regulations, have certainly done nothing but increase over time. Any comments?
Yeah, I think sometimes also cost of recruiting. I think we're kind of living in a mini bubble. If you look at social web, if you look at new media, if you look at web startups, web projects, there is a lot of very successful, very quickly growing companies in the Valley that are getting the top talent. And believe it or not, maybe it's the dot-com bust followed by the recession. A lot of folks are valuing stability, gainful employment, and a brand name employer over a new, excited, uncharted territory of a startup. So I know both some companies where we ended up investing in and some companies who are clients of ours, they have a tough time finding the talent because, frankly, it's young college graduate who's maybe got an opportunity to go work for Twitter or Facebook or Google, like a talented person versus, or a veteran who's got the same opportunities, he's going to take, 9 times out of 10, they're going to take that job versus, a two-person startup that either has no funding at all or has a runway of the next 6 months. So as a result, it used to be, at least from what I'm seeing, used to be the salaries used to be a lot lower in the startups in the last cycle, and then, you would make it up with stock options. Maybe it's my experience that sometimes skewed. Maybe just we didn't get lucky with the right type of hires. But the startups that I see now, they pay in market rate, and I'm putting stock options on top of that just to get the talent. So I think that may be another thing contributing to the cost of doing business versus places like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, where you still have this capacity, this bandwidth for new startups, new projects. You have a lot of local talented workforce. And the new startups absorb those, so there is no pull on the market, and perhaps that's another factor.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I haven't seen that, of course, survey. I don't know what's involved, but probably a lot of these countries they're trying to compete for this new business of startups. Like, for example, England, I know they're pretty aggressive. They have some places, incubators. Russia, I guess, very soon gonna overtake US with Skolkovo in the tech. So I think to me it's more like other countries trying to compete for this business, and perhaps US at some point will realize that, okay, let us compete as well. And I would like to actually point something out that they do. For example, it will be interesting for those of you who are US resident and would like to stay in US in the long run, but if you register a company this year, if you open your C corporation this year, you buy stock, and you hold this company for 5 years and then sell it after 5 years at the gain, this gain is taxed as 0 federal rate of tax. So you might have California tax if you don't move to Nevada before you sell it, So, but it's a huge break. It's never before has been around, and I think this might have been done in order to compete with those other countries that give you all kind of incentives to open their startups and open their shops there. So I guess maybe if they do survey for 2011, US might get bumped up a little bit.
So I think that the Americans have invested so much money in the American dream concept, so they need somehow to recoup that. But
Yeah.
And these guys don't charge little, so they
well, to be serious, I totally agree with the previous speakers, and that's why our core idea is to find all those opportunities in emerging markets to give to this or that startup, depending on what they really need. So we are looking for all those new opportunities, and we can recommend and choose the best one of them out of them all, because well, there is plenty of very similar programs in different countries now, and in those countries that you have mentioned above, but there are some peculiarities for each of them. So we are trying to investigate all of them and to recommend the best variants for startups.
Quick question for you, Renata. In terms of grants in Skolkovo, since this is the best, one of the best deals right on the table for startups, and your company definitely can help with that. What's the requirements for grants? What the experts are looking for? A little different topic, but I think it's very important. So can you say something about that?
Yes, Russia is trying to build the innovation environment, so they are very interested in building the entrepreneurial just world inside Russia. Well, I always like to say just that Russia needs to learn the entrepreneurial spirit from US and Israel, and the skills of PR from US, because, well, the Americans can just promote everything. And this is very important now for Russia. And grants are usually given in research and development, so you can't spend them on marketing, for example, especially marketing abroad in a huge amount of those money. But you can also, for sure put some marketing in your business plan when you are applying for a grant, but well, you should also think about the political side of this deal, so you need to to hire some Russian engineers, for example, for your research and development, so there are some peculiarities here also.
Okay, great. I think our time is up.